Welcome to the Core EM Podcast, core content for anyone, anywhere, and just in time. As promised last week, this is an additional podcast where we're going to highlight a talk that Jay Lemery gave at our shop for our Wilderness Medicine Conference on May 6, 2015. Now, Jay Lemery is an associate professor of emergency medicine at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, and he's the chief of the Wilderness and Environmental Medicine sections. He's the immediate past president for the Wilderness Medicine Society, and he's currently the EMS medical director for the United States Antarctic Program. Jay's also co-editor for a textbook coming out this year called Global Climate Change and Human Health, looking at the interplay between medicine, health, and how it affects the environment. This talk that Jay gave is about wilderness medicine in 2015 and what it means to emergency medicine and why we should all be interested in the topic. Without further ado, here's Jay Lemery.
Who were maybe halfway through residency. It's a tough time of year. I guess it's spring now, but Chris and I now work together at the University of Colorado, and we're just saying that there's a lot of, take heart, you're getting awesome training, and this program continues to shine nationally. It was difficult to see that when you're in New York, but now that, we're out of state, you see that. So it's exciting to be back, and my job today is to kind of tell you what I'm up to, just to share with you the field of wilderness medicine, but also kind of tell you a story about how people, how you can advance your careers by finding niches. And I think it's hard for you to see that maybe while you're in residency. I'm speaking to the residents particularly, but opportunities come up, and I'm going to try and explain to you how I was sparked here when I was confronted with the question halfway through residency, what do you want to do? What's your niche going to be? I said, well, and this was some of the residency leaders. I said, what do you mean, niche? They said, well, you're going to, do you want to stay in academics? Do you want to work in private? I said, well, academic might be a little bit more interesting to me. And they're like, okay, what's your niche? I said, well, I have a niche. It's emergency medicine. And they're like, no, dummy. Within emergency medicine. And I just remember being kind of frustrated. And then across the room in a dream, I saw a bright light come towards me. And it was a very serene voice. And it came in the form of a Yankee medallion who said to me, do follow your heart. And I don't see Jeff here, but thank you, Jeff Manco, for telling me that. Because I did, and lo and behold, here I am talking about something that I never thought I'd be talking about 11 years later. So we're going to talk about wilderness medicine. Why do we care about it? What is it? What are we talking about this in New York City? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the rationale. We'll talk about what are people doing with it. And that's, again, you can see what physicians are doing with it. And then a little bit about the grand challenge, which sort of challenges us in medicine, particularly with a particular topic within wilderness medicine that I think is the next great opportunity for not only wilderness medicine, but emergency medicine. So we'll talk about that. So what is it? Well, it's kind of everything, right? You can see here there's a bunch of different things that are really subspecialties in and of themselves. And I think when I think about wilderness medicine, it's the art and science of taking care of people in remote or austere environments. And that really means when you don't have your ambulance or your clinic or your hospital backing you up. So it's not quite frontier medicine because there's definitely 21st century tools and skill sets to have, but it challenges us to think about how do we, again, apply the best practice in a place that's remote or austere. And so when you think about it like that, it kind of broadens the field. And you can also see there's interactions with things that you don't see in New York City, tropical disease and so forth. So why do we care? I'm going to talk about, I used to have 4 reasons to talk about, then it became 4 plus 1, and now it's just 5. So I'll just talk you through it. The first is patient demographics. The world is becoming more green. We're becoming a more green-centric society. The amount of people going to recreation areas is increasing. The types of people that are going are changing, the demographics. So, oops, okay, you don't have a laser. But this is the defining demographic shift of your careers and our career, right? This is what's happening, the geriatrification of not just America, but really the world. But these types of people, you can imagine when this woman sprains her ankle, it's very different than when Hong sprains his ankle on a trail. How do you begin to think about risk assessment with someone with concomitant CHF and diabetes, right? So the way we think about things changes. And then there's what I call the dumbass effect. People going off and doing crazy things because these places are more accessible than ever. There's a culture emerging where we can go and do extreme rock climbing or do crazy trips to Antarctica, and that may be well and good, but what's happening is there's a widening gap of risk assessment. Gravity still works the same in these places in 2015 as it did 100 years ago. Antarctica is still a very hostile place, and just because you can get there doesn't mean it's necessarily less dangerous. So to be able to be articulate on that gap of risk assessment is important, and also to understand how to mitigate that. That's where we come in. And then more and more people are going abroad, and if you're not into wilderness medicine comes to you. This was a picture of my foot after coming back from Guyana in South America. Doorway diagnosis. Well, I was convinced I had scabies, and so I began to treat myself for scabies. And then I remember swimming in a river, and I moved on to schistosomiasis and drew my own blood and called my own infectious disease consult and started taking medicine for schistosomiasis. And then Dr. McStay sends me a picture of his foot, which is exactly the same, sealing the diagnosis of cutaneous larva migrans. Yep, okay. At which point I called my primary care doctor and said, I can no longer take care of myself. Would you please assume my care for me? Funny. Number 2, the world's coming to an end, right? I don't have to tell you guys about this. The disaster preparedness is, of course, now part of our DNA. We were actually here on September 11th when the world changed. And the point is that there's a lot of money here, and these skill sets play into that. This is a group of New York Presbyterian EMS guys, and we went out to Cornell, Ithaca, when I was at Cornell, just up the street. And we mocked up a situation in this tower and said, someone's up in the tower, they're calling for help. And they said, well, what's the situation? And I said, I don't know. They said, well, who's in charge? I don't know. And so what we really were doing was forcing these guys to think beyond the algorithm, beyond the algorithm. How do you organize yourself when you don't have your EMS structure intact, right? That's the essence of disaster response, is to be able to have a meaning, to be able to improvise like that. And then just 3 weeks later, the hospital deployed this group down to Mississippi, where we assisted with Hurricane Katrina. This was in 2005. And so, again, the ability to have improvisational skill sets to be able to think like that. Algorithms are super important, right? That's the basis of what we do. And we have to know them, but we also have to have the confidence and some training to deviate from them in extreme situations. Number 3, what I like to call the ascendancy of global health. Who has been involved in a global health program, whether it's an undergraduate or in med school? Raise your hand. Okay, so a good chunk of you. What's happened is that global health now has become really the norm, but if you look closer, it's not so normal. There's a huge discrepancy. Only a few people are doing it thoughtfully and well, and many people are just creating like, hey, we send people here, and we're doing it. And it's not dissimilar to the gold rush of yesteryear, when you have lines of people going up into the Klondike. Many of them, most of them came back poor, many perished, and only a few did very well. And I think that's what we're seeing with global health. And what I mean by that is, this is a rhetorical question, what's the situational awareness of students in traveling to low to middle income countries who have grown up in an OSHA world, right? And I think that's the essence of preparation. And so, again, the rationale for wilderness medicine is, I think the skill sets that you learn in these courses and this body of knowledge is extraordinarily applicable for people participating in global health ventures. I like to bring up this picture because this is sort of the extreme case of global health, humanitarian response. And here's a what am I thinking question, but what's this helicopter doing? This is in Haiti. So you're probably thinking, well, they're probably taking injured patients to the hospital ships or doing something like that. And yes, they were doing a lot of that. But in the first week of the U.S. military's presence there, these 18% of helicopter sorties were looking for lost humanitarian responders that had come from the United States or Europe, mostly the U.S. because it was so close, right? Think about that, right? This was a huge humanitarian disaster in a vulnerable country just hit with a huge earthquake, a very precarious situation. And the people that are there to help are now wasting their time finding people who came to help but were too prepared, and now they've added to the burden, right? And so again, this is just sort of an epitome of what we're talking about is, preparation. Okay, number 4. And I think this is important when we explain why we're doing this in a place like New York when you're talking to a chair or a dean, and it's the lost art of the physical exam. And I think we've all had those situations where a med student rushes up and says, I hear this great heart sound, let's talk about it. And the stressed out team says, okay, just get an echo. Okay, let's move on. And that might be right and appropriate in a resource-rich environment in 2015. But the problem is that we're losing the confidence in the art of the physical exam because we're in a resource-rich environment. And so I think what I like to say whether it's the institution I work for or Cornell or this institution, which are all outstanding, which is we're not training the next generation of physicians to only be effective on First Avenue. We're training them to be effective anywhere in the world, to be excellent clinicians. And most of the world does not have these skill sets. So when we run our courses and put students in an environment like Matt did when we were up in the Adirondacks, it's a very powerful learning tool to say, you have what you have, here you are, you have your hands to figure this out. And I think it reinforces something that's really at the core of what it means to be a physician. Number 5, environmental change, climate change, and human health. We're going to save this to the end. So we've gone through the rationale as to why we think this is worth doing in medical academia. So what are people doing with it? Okay, well, the big thing is education. That seems to be a very easy place where a lot of our colleagues are diving in. And these are just pictures of the medical student electives run semi-annually at Cornell. Why are they good? They usually, and we'll talk about wellness, but there's never a shortage of instructors there. So when we run these trips, it's easy to get people to come because they're awesome trips. And we make no bones about that. Wellness is an extraordinarily important part of being a physician, and it fits in very well with this mission, of course. There's good scenario-based learning. There are awesome learning opportunities. And when you run these courses in a place like the Adirondacks or southern Utah, they're wonderful places where you're away from the pressures of clinical duties, where you can really do some awesome teaching. And from that, the testimonials are always, 9.9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. This is the best course I've ever taken. Of course it is, because you have time to do pure teaching, and it's very difficult to do that when people are balancing teaching with clinical load, family life, et cetera, et cetera. The curricula can be very innovative in these environments. And again, we talked about physical exam reinforcement and other things such as teamwork skill sets. We always laugh from emergency medicine saying, we should bring the surgeons on these trips. And sometimes we do. And it's, people come back much stronger. And so some of the stuff we're doing in Colorado is multidisciplinary, where we get out of our traditional roles, all go to a cool place and learn together, learn some good skill sets. And those team building dividends really play out back in the clinical arena. The one issue with wilderness medicine, which is to me always readily recognizable, is that there's very low barriers to entry, meaning anyone can do it. And in fact, most people, when they think of wilderness medicine, are like, oh yeah, isn't that the time when so-and-so took a six-pack and took 6 residents up to the cabin and they kind of partied all weekend? There's a lot of that, and that does exist, absolutely. And I think there's a huge range of quality experiences. So I think in terms of where we could do better is that, and really understanding that if this field is going to have any respect, then it has to be the same principles as all the other, grounded in education and research and so forth. Has anyone ever heard of this, the Flexner report? Maybe? Okay, so the reason med schools are the way they are, the 4 years of med schools, is because Abraham Flexner, 100 years ago, established a landmark report which was an assessment of American medical education. And that was the time when all the, Dr. McStay's Magical Tonic shop got shut down, because that was when all the mom and pop quack shops were eliminated, and we really focused on accreditation, and that's where the concept of the basic scientist clinician was codified, if you will. So 2 years basic science, 2 years of clinical, and that really exists till today. They redid the Flexner report a couple of years ago, which was really meant to be just kind of a broad look at medical education. And there were a few things that were interesting. The recommendations and the mandate for change to make professional formation an explicit area focused in medical education and exploring the role of the physician citizen. They cited the importance of innovation in medical education and called for an establishment of medical school learning tracks. Are there tracks here? Does anyone know? I know this is one of those things that a lot of med schools are now exploring. So I think this is important because when educators and deans are charged with answering this report, I think this is, and we've had a lot of inquiries about what is the wilderness medicine curriculum, should this be a track, does it click the boxes that we are now looking to click in terms of the physician citizen and innovation in medical education. The physician citizen, keep that in mind because that's what we're going to talk about at the end. ACEP and SAEM have very robust wilderness medicine sections. Anyone remember? Okay. SAEM is a lot of residents are involved. It's and it's interesting because it's not just pure wilderness medicine. It's really a section that they've defined it. And many people are interested in humanitarian response and more of the austere medicine. So places that are purely austere, although maybe not traditional wilderness settings. When I last checked, and admittedly it's about a year old, ACEP had 520 members. For those interested, there are postgraduate fellowships. So after residency, if you just can't get enough, you need one more year of training, this is what you can do. These fellowships vary. There's about, I think now there's maybe 12 or 14 of them. I think most people do, there's a couple of flavors. I think a lot of people do fellowships to want to be wilderness medicine doctors and then go work in wilderness settings. I actually think that's a bad idea. I think most people coming out of a competent EM program have the ability to work in a wilderness setting, and they don't need to do a full fellowship for that. They can go get a fat job somewhere, negotiate 1 or 2 months off a year, and go work in those settings and train themselves through other ways, such as CME or conferences and stuff. I think the real future of fellowships is if one is interested in being a thought leader in the field and really want to, whether it's start a fellowship somewhere or become maybe an EMS director of a very remote setting, kind of like what we're doing for Antarctica, that I think fellowships make sense because it's a great way to sort of increase your national network. So just keep that in mind for those that are interested. We have a great one out in Colorado. And this is definitely one of those, this is the new part, this is a fellowship that's very new. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of different, a lot of change in the next few years regarding postgraduate wilderness medicine fellowships. And some of them are crafted differently. Utah's wilderness medicine EMS. Some of them are crafted as austere. So again, for those that are interested, really read carefully because they're very different in terms of their scope. And of course, many are very personality dependent depending on who's running them. There's been a recent paper that came out in Academic Emergency Medicine, which is a consensus document about what the core fellowship competencies are. And we're not going into so much of what the core of wilderness medicine is in this lecture. I kind of wanted to give you sort of a sense of the field. But for those that are interested, you can sort of see it's a traditional hypothermia, et cetera. Will this be an ACGME approved fellowship? I don't think anytime soon. I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, I think the ACGME is sort of, or the American Board of the American Board of Medical Specialties is kind of putting the brakes on new specialties coming out. And I also don't think the field is mature enough. I think EMS is a model pathway for this, but I would say we're probably 10 years out from being having a competitive case to support that. In terms of research, it's a tough field to have for research. The places that tend to do very well are altitude. Altitude tends to be funded very well, and frostbite has some research behind it. Altitude is, interestingly, a high priority for the Department of Defense. So at the University of Colorado, we have an altitude research center that has several multi-million-dollar projects going on for rapid acclimatization. So how fast can we get our soldiers up to mountain passes, from lowland bases, and how long can they stay there and be effective during their jobs without getting sick? So this is a huge area of research that's going on right now. The rest of research I can't say it's very robust, but it does exist. I think a good place to look is what's come out in the Elsevier Journal, Wilderness and Environmental Medicine, which is the journal of the Wilderness Medical Society. It's a nonprofit, and I was the past president, and Dr. McStay is a board member. And you can see here, these are the peer-reviewed guidelines. So they're consensus documents with graded recommendations of how to approach these common core wilderness medicine topics. And they just came out with a December 14 supplemental where they updated all of them. So it's a great resource for those that are interested. The WMS gives out about $30,000 in annual research grants. Most go to altitude, frostbite, extreme sports, so exercise-induced hyponatremia has been a big topic of getting funded. So what does the marketplace look like? And I think this is where I'd like to just share this with you as potential for your career and how people can get involved to different degrees. As I said before, it's a field that will probably never be an NIH priority. So there's not a lot of money coming into it in terms of just pure funding. But what you do see, and this is a picture of REI, okay, which is all these people that go to REI and spend tons of money buying cool gear. These are your people that will spend tons of money hanging out with us to learn cool wilderness medicine skill sets. Whether it's wilderness first aid, first responder, there's a million different products. But the same stuff that you learn can be taught to lay people. And this is, there are very rich marketplaces where companies, like Knowles, for instance, have done very well at making money from this. So this is something that works more at the University of Colorado to try to create revenue streams for us to fund stuff like our fellowship and to provide for our educational mission in places that just have very lean funding. CMEs are a crowded marketplace, but still very viable. We're doing work with the Wilderness Medical Society and some of our own. You can see here these places. So the business model is basically pick a cool place that our people want to go to, and then care providers that are required to have X amount of CMEs per year once they're out of their training have to do that. So they say, rather than going to a conference in Duluth, maybe I'll go to Costa Rica and learn things. So this is, again, a place for people to go and a way to generate revenue. Not just generate revenue for an institution, but also all these groups are always looking for instructors. So this is a great way for you to have a vacation sort of supplemented and paid for and get and have this part of your skill sets. There's lots of certifications out there. There's no certifying body, so this is, again, kind of a wild west, if you will, and you just have to sort of understand that lots of different groups are offering certifications. Some of these groups are for-profit companies, others are universities, others are nonprofits like Knowles, but they have these acronyms: Advanced Wilderness Life Support. The diploma in mountain medicine was just brought over from Europe. It's very well respected in the mountaineering community there, and now it's being offered here. It's an intensive, probably 4 to 6 week course, which people take over 3 to 4 years. WFR and WFA are Wilderness First Responder, which is about a 5-day course. Wilderness First Aid is about a 2-day course. avalanche courses, and then MOOCs, which is something that we've experimented with. Anyone know what a MOOC is? It's kind of a crazy name. Massive Open Online Course. And these are the things that have come out in the last few years, funded by Silicon Valley, where, which is Coursera is one of the open online companies, where they'll run a course and they'll have not hundreds of people, but thousands and sometimes tens or even hundreds of thousands of people worldwide sign up. And what we're doing now, and it just started, we launched it on Monday, is kind of taking these skill sets that I talked about, frame them in a global health context, and put them online. And so for those that want to check it out, go to Coursera.org and you can see it. It's free. We've got several thousands of people worldwide signed up. I think we have 120 countries, a quarter of which are from people in developing nations. So this is kind of changing the face of education. No one knows where this is going to land, but it's a very exciting way to educate, to combine online with hands-on. And that's what this course is really designed for. This is we've got 29 10-minute lectures. They're very short. This is sort of the new paradigm for these online courses. And then what we're hoping to do is capture a handful of those to come and take our hands-on courses at different places that we're offering them. So again, the online component is becoming a larger part of this. What we're seeing is that commercial groups and academic groups are blurring. Academic groups are now doing things that commercial groups have done, like offering these first responder skills to lay people. And commercial groups, one group is now offering medical student electives at different medical schools. So again, this to me is really just a reflection of the Wild West environment that I think we're seeing. But again, lots of opportunities for sure. When people ask me how to get involved, I say, well, it's very difficult to be a wilderness medicine doctor. There's just not a lot of money in it. There's not a ton of opportunities, but it's very easy to get involved. And I'd like to think of this as the 15% approach, where you can't do it 100%, but 15% can do it. And we all know our busy clinical load, and I think this is a really important part to diversify your career and get involved with things. All groups are constantly looking for medical direction, and here just a random sampling of groups involved in outdoor activity. And they're always wanting to have people, clinicians, to come in and help them understand medical protocols, what are the risks, do risk assessments, and so forth. And it's a great way to sort of get involved. And in fact, this is what we did with the U.S. Antarctic program at Colorado, where now a big chunk of our budget for the section comes from Lockheed Martin, which is the subcontractor for the National Science Foundation. And so we're in charge of emergency medical services, running as medical direction for the Antarctic program. Individuals have often said, well, how do I get covered for this? And so what we're seeing now, and this is kind of a cool thing, is under the auspices of this nonprofit physician organization, is exploring pooled liability for medical direction. So if you're a practitioner in a remote area and maybe you're not covered through your organization or your university that you're working for, there's a need, and hopefully soon there'll be a way to cover yourself to provide medical direction as an individual practitioner. It's one of those things where you call your insurance company, and I've heard this from a lot of my colleagues, and the insurance company just doesn't know how to answer that. Am I covered to give medical support for the local Boy Scout troop who I'm involved with? And they'll say yes and no and maybe, and it's lots of times there's an intransigence to get these questions answered, and I think it's frustrating for people that want to get involved. Event support is a big way to get involved too. I'm an expert in blister care because we for years helped with the Avon Breast Cancer Walk, where we would deal with thousands of blisters. Again, that's a great way to sort of get involved for extreme sports or whatever, to practice sort of austere medicine. This is just a banner I took a picture of from Everest Base Camp. It was a marathon that they ran, starting at 17,500 feet. Luckily, it went downhill. Media opportunities are everywhere, particularly, of course, in New York. This is the home of the national media market. So there's always people wanting to get your take on weather, tourist recreation, disasters. There's a lost hiker on Mount Hood. What's going through their mind right now? There's a lot of people out there that actually don't know what they're talking about and giving bad advice. And I think there's a niche to be filled for people to have education in these areas to be sort of the go-to person for media. This was a dock worker that I had the honor of interviewing for a Good Morning America segment. And it was truthfully pretty ridiculous. They asked, but we were doing it on behalf of the hospital, and they asked us, tell us, how can we show that it's really hot outside? And I said, well, how about we take his pulse, and then we put him in the ambulance, put him in the air conditioning, and then recheck his pulse. And I bet you it'll be lower. And then the medical director, or the producer looked at me, he's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And so we did it. They actually rechecked his pulse, the paramedics did, and he said to me, Doc, it's not lower. I'm like, yes, it is. Yep, it's 20 points lower. Let's get out of here. These things tend to draw a lot of media attention. This is our colleague, Dr. Freer, at the Everspace Camp Medical Clinic, and of course, in the aftermath of the earthquake in Kathmandu in Nepal, this got a lot of attention for the climbers up there. And again, being able to weigh in on these matters are media opportunities. This is what happened for me in 2007. I was reading the newspaper. There was an awesome New York Times interactive on climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and you could click on it and you could see the guy's heart rate go up, and he went to the different camps, and I think it's still online. It was magnificently done. But he basically described how he progressively got acute mountain sickness and kept going up, which of course is a big no-no. So I was incensed, and I wrote a letter to the editor for the opinion pages, articulating that this is actually a dangerous message, it was irresponsible, and this puts people in harm's way if they think this is the right thing to do. It didn't get accepted, but I wrote it nonetheless. But again, opportunities. All these CMEs, like I said, and this is just a random sampling, everyone is always looking for people to lecture on different topics. So again, these are great ways for you to sort of ply your trade and have some opportunities to travel and get involved. Just a few niche things I want to cover real quickly is this used to be considered wilderness medicine. I would call it more austere medicine, but has anyone ever worked on a cruise ship? What used to be kind of, in the middle of nowhere, Spartan resources now have fully functioning ICUs. But some of the craziest stories I've heard in emergency medicine come from these places where you have 5,000 octogenarians dancing all night after they ate the lobster bisque and are now headed to the chocolate bar. What does this do to CHF exacerbations and so forth? It's a whole new, it's uncharted territory, and as cruise ships get bigger and bigger, we're learning more and more. But again, these are great opportunities for those that can take the time to travel. Most of the cruise ships now are asking, used to be you could jump in for a week and get out. Now they're asking for 3-6 month commitments. But if you're able to do it, it's a fun way to practice. This is just a slide to say that a lot of the research and things we learn from wilderness medicine come out of the military. Totally separate field. We're not going to get into that, but important to know that that is that exists, and we pay a lot of attention, especially from the war theaters in Iraq and Afghanistan. What are the latest things we're learning about wound care and stuff like that? Because there's there's the need, but also there's a lot of money from the Defense Department going into research. I'm not going to harp on this, but it has to be part of any strategy is to say that the things involved in wilderness medicine really do help wellness. And I think that's a very, very important part of sustaining a long and healthy career that keeps you invested in medicine. I think the real tragedy of what we do is to see colleagues who burn out and then try and do something completely different than medicine after spending so much time in it. So I like it because it's a way to diversify a career but still stay in medicine and diversify the knowledge base. I think that's very important. So where is this all headed? Well, if I had to predict, I think what we're seeing is, and this might make your head explode, is increased supply and increased demand. And I have no idea if that's how that actually works. I just remember it shifts to the right. And I think that's what we're seeing in the world of wilderness medicine. We have more and more people that are going to conferences and learning this. There's programs popping up. So we've got the graduate effect, if you will, where practitioners are looking to more ways to practice. And on the demand side, we know that the pressures are real, right? This is a photograph from my last shift at our hospital on Monday afternoon. And then there's pressures from our friends in the Joint Commission. And then, of course, the medical legal aspects are there. And I think what this does is that it gives us a way to, again, diversify from the very real pressures of our day job. And then, of course, there's this, which is creating a whole bunch of uncertainty in the future. And I think, again, it's a way for people to stay invested in medicine. So I think what we're looking at is a bull market. Lots of opportunities, and I think it's just going to keep growing. And so for those that are interested, just keep a beat on this, because you'll be seeing a lot of activities in all these areas. I just want to finish with what I think is very important, probably the most important thing that wilderness medicine could do. I don't think it's there yet, and I don't think very many people are making the link between wilderness medicine and climate change and health. What we're seeing is, I'd like to think of this as a policy end of wilderness medicine. As climate change becomes a larger part of the national debate, and we're seeing the effects are becoming more readily apparent, there's very few in the House of Medicine who have owned this topic and are articulating the health risks from a purely health standpoint. What am I talking about? Well, we're talking about the change in vector-borne diseases and what that means for vulnerable populations. We're seeing extreme storms. Of course, we've had experience with that here. The largest storm ever recorded was Hurricane Sandy. The most powerful was Typhoon Haiyan, and this was 2 years ago. We're seeing the effects of extreme heat waves, again, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable in the inner cities. We're seeing both the bell curve of weather is getting wider, so we're seeing extreme precipitation and extreme dryness in different areas. And here's just a summary slide, and you guys have access to this, to say these are the health effects of climate change from temperature rise, sea level, and extreme weather. And what I think fits in our core mission is that we all are going to be challenged with this, but it's the most vulnerable who are going to get pummeled. And this is some work we did at the Harvard School of Public Health on this. The people who suffer the most are in the most vulnerable regions to begin with, living in regions with perilous human insecurity. And I always, when I give this lecture, I always think about what happened here at Bellevue and Tisch. And this is not always part of the national conversation on this. Is yes, we lost lives. About 200 lives in Sandy, I think. And yes, we lost property, and now we're talking about building seawalls in New York Harbor. But we also lost the flagship public hospital of New York for a year. And I'm not going to, you guys saw this firsthand. But that's a real blow to vulnerable populations. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this. So I think in many ways this is becoming a health issue, but also a human rights issue. And so just taking that big picture view, and this is work we did at the Harvard School of Public Health in a journal. For those that are interested, you can see there's some very well-written overviews on climate justice and exactly what that means at hhrjournal.org. So taking that larger view, what is wilderness medicine? We have a dual mandate to the environment and the patients. We work in some of the most sensitive ecosystems across the planet, like Antarctica. We've got skill sets in climate-related disease and disaster response and an outstanding tradition of education. Emergency medicine is right there too. And I think the added boost that emergency medicine is that we are the experts in treating the most vulnerable. So I think within the House of Medicine, we are exceptionally well poised to own this issue in these combined skill sets and basically do what needs to be done, which is to change our risk assessment and change the climate dialogue and reframe it from polar bears melting to children's risk of pulmonary disease. And essentially just rebrand climate change as a public health issue. Get away from altruistic terms of love your mother and save the whales, or abstract terms such as parts per million of carbon dioxide, which most people have no idea what that even means or how to understand how to attribute risk to that, and talk about risk of your parents' risk of lung disease and your children's risk of asthma. And to jump in on the national discourse to talk about energy choices, the importance of a healthy urban environment, loss of biodiversity, access to clean water, and extremes and storms. I'm just going to leave with one anecdote from about 30 years ago. The Cold War was raging, and there was a doctrine that began to emerge to talk about how nuclear wars could be winnable. You can win a nuclear war. It was a very scary escalation at the time. At that time, there were American and Russian physicians who just thought enough is enough. They came together and they reframed it, the threat as a purely health threat, of which this was the final epidemic with no meaningful cure. And because it was a pure health issue, in many ways they were unimpeachable from either side of the Iron Curtain, and they were a very powerful voice in what was ultimately the final days of the Cold War. And because of that, they won the Nobel Peace Prize. I think we're looking at something similar, where we have a big, scary, existential-like threat that's hard to get people to understand it, and there's many people with alternative agendas, and I think we're staring at the same thing where now we have the chance to really weigh in with what we do best, science communication for health, and say that this is bad, and I think we're exceptionally well poised to do that. So I'll stop there, and thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to be back here.